Hello, this is Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California. My name is Pastor Shafer. I'm the senior pastor at Mount Olive. And each week we talk to interesting people from around the community and around the country and even around the world about the theme of hope. Our guest today is Rhonda Clay, and Ron and I were just talking, and we think we know we've known each other for more than 30 years. Rhonda lives in Knoxville, Tennessee, member of St. John Lutheran Church there, a lifelong Lutheran.
Yes, cradle Lutheran.
Cradle, and grave a far piece away, and has been a friend of mine. We worked together in Chicago, but we actually worked together before that. Has been a friend of mine for all these years, and it's so good to have you on our program today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
Rhonda has spent most of her work life working as a volunteer in congregations. Her husband is the musician at the congregation where they live now, but also in working in nonprofits, a variety of nonprofits, working with all kinds of people. I think, Rhonda, when you went through that list, the theme was nonprofits that help people who need help,
Yes.
They're involved in service to people. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
And one of her passions, or maybe you can tell me, your major passion, is working with women who are victims of domestic violence. And Rhonda, I think our viewers would be interested in hearing about anything you want to share about that work.
Well, Eric, you remember when I was working with you that I was in a rather tumultuous marriage, my first marriage. And when I talk about that time in my life, believe it or not, I always hold you and Chris and John up as examples of the best people to be with in a situation that you don't want to be in. When I got married, I always say it shouldn't have been me. When we think about domestic violence victims, we usually think about, that they are undereducated, underemployed, not a lot of options in life, and are kind of stuck in that situation. And that truly was not me. Educated, middle management, working a great job, very career oriented, and still ended up in a situation that began with verbal abuse and escalated beyond that. So, and I kind of married my high school sweetheart. I wasn't young. I was 25 when I got married. Actually, I was 30 when I got married. I was 25 when I started working at the ELCA. I was 30 when I got married and thought that I had, waited, and we did premarital counseling. We did all the things correctly, and yet still ended up in this situation. And it was very difficult for me to see from the inside that what was happening, the manipulation and the verbal had started, and it took someone else. It took a girlfriend of mine, Vicky, that I would ride to work with, to say, you used to be this very outgoing person, and you always had your hair done, you always had your nails done, you were always outgoing, and you've really changed. Are you okay? And of course, yes, I'm fine. There are some little things, but I'm going to stay married. I was raised, you stay married until you die, or one of you dies, and that's how that goes. And, I had a good example of marriage with my parents, of what it should be, and things just were not right. And I remember once you called me into your office and said, someone has mentioned that they might have seen a bruise on your arm. Are you okay? And I think I lied to you then. I think I lied to you at that time. But when things started to unravel and I finally decided, everything came to a head one night shortly after my son was born. And my husband and I had an argument, and he threw something at me while I was holding our son. And I decided then that I was not going to raise my son in a house with a cycle of abuse. I didn't want him to grow up doing that. So I decided then that I was going to leave. And I did, and I didn't tell anyone. One of the things that abusers count on is that people are going to be too embarrassed, or that their victim will be too embarrassed to talk about what is actually going on. So when I left, I didn't tell anyone. I took my son and some clothes, and we hid out in a hotel for a few days. And finally, I told my mom, who opened up her home to me. And so we were able to be there. And things got pretty bad. He stalked me. As you know, I ended up with an order of protection, which you guys handled beautifully. It is, if there is a textbook example of how a woman who is going through a situation like that should and can be protected by her place of work, the ELCA did that. We had the photo at security downstairs. We had Judy knew where it was and exactly what the procedure was. I remember when John and I were at a lunch and he came in, and you running around the corner to tell us he's in the building, but we've called the police. So John, keep Rhonda over here and we'll work that out. So that was, as I said, it was a perfect situation. Many times in abuse, victims decide not to press charges because they really don't have any other options. That is their place to live. That is their income, and they have no other way to do things. When I first started working with United Way in Chicago, and I worked with the Allstate Domestic Violence Foundation, and I was on panels, I would sit on panels with people. And I sat on a panel with a woman who told me her husband was a lawyer, prominent attorney in a small town, and she was suffering abuse, and she was trying to leave, and she had 3 children, I believe. She would save money. What she would do is she would get coupons for the groceries and save the change, because he didn't want them to use coupons because it would look bad if she used coupons, because he was of a certain stature in the community and he controlled all the money. So she would get coupons and save that money, and she was saving money in a shoebox in her closet so that she could get a retainer to leave him. When she finally got enough money for a retainer, no attorney would take her divorce case because he was that prominent and no one wanted to go against him. So she had to go to another town to get the attorney. When he was served, he froze all of their accounts and took the kids and said she had no income, she had no way to support. And she was saying he gave her her clothes. So she was going to court in, Chanel and Armani suits, saying she was destitute. And the judge is looking at her, like, you're dressed like this, but she had no money. She had nothing, she had no access to her money, to any money. And it was very difficult. And when I worked with people on the North Shore in Chicago, the affluent suburbs out there, it was the same thing. I would tell my story about what happened to me, and I would have women come up to me afterwards and say, thank you for telling my story. I can't leave, but thank you for telling my story. So whenever I do tell the story of tell the whole thing about
Rhonda, we lost your video. Oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It happens.
I had my phone on Do Not Disturb, but call came through. Whenever I do tell my story about how I survived abuse and that there is life after abuse, I'm married to a wonderful man. I never denied the institution of marriage. I think marriage is a wonderful institution and it is perfect, but I picked the wrong one the first time. So it didn't work out. But now I'm in a marriage that is wonderful. I'm thriving, my child is thriving, and things are wonderful. So whenever I tell that story, I always hope that if there is only one person in the room who hears the story, who knows that there is a way to get out. And how I got out was, I had a friend that was a police officer who, once I told him, again, I didn't tell a lot of people. So once I told her what was going on, she connected me with a wonderful domestic violence agency in Chicago. And I always start off my story by saying, if it were not for God, my family, and the domestic violence agency I was with, I would not be here. I met a wonderful woman. Her name is Tara Dabney. I always talk about her. Literally, my son is now 30 minutes from her hometown, and her mother told him, if you are ever hungry, you get in your car and you drive 30 minutes and you got a meal. Because we're still friends to this day. And I always say she's such a little spitfire. And I said she was from Kentucky. And once I moved down here, I got the accent, because when I met her, I was like, "What? Where are you from? What accent is that?" But she was a little ball of spitfire. And I mean, to the point that, I was in the hospital and I called her, and the hospital was saying, well, we have to have somebody, if we're going to admit you, we have to have somebody take care of the child. We need to call the other parent. And she would be sitting there, little 4'11.5" tall white woman going, I'm her sister, and so the baby will be with me. And standing up to him and telling him in the hallway of the court system, you're going to leave her alone. You can't get near her. And just having that kind of support. And I totally recognize that everyone does not, but it's available. Domestic violence agencies are there for that reason. I was blessed in that I never had to go into a shelter. You and Chris opened your house to me. If it ever came to that, you told me, if you ever need somewhere to go, I can do that. I said I had a textbook example of what support looked like once I opened myself up to telling what was going on with me.
Rhonda, you and I have been around these issues long enough to know that there are people that are going to be watching this interview who have been abused, women and even maybe some men. So what's the first step they need to do if they're in an abusive relationship?
The first step is to know that it is not your fault. Abusers like to say, you made me do this to you. It's your fault. You are not worthy. You are not good enough. There are things that you can do to stop this. You cannot. So own that you are okay. This is not your fault. And the first step is to tell someone. Now, reactions are going to be different. So you might tell someone, for example, my ex-mother-in-law, her pastor said, you just have to be a better wife and he'll stop beating you. And that's not the case. Never the case. Reach out and find a domestic violence agency near you. We talked earlier about the National Domestic Violence Abuse Hotline. There is a national hotline that will get you to somewhere local. Find one of those agencies. Take the step to figure out how to get out. But no, when a person decides to leave an abusive situation, that is the most dangerous time, because the abuser then feels like they're losing control. And last time I looked, it was 77% of the cases. That's when the abuse will escalate at that point.
Wow.
So have a ready bag. There's a movie that Jennifer Lopez is in, I think it's called Enough, where she keeps a bag in the trunk of her car with cash, clothes, ID, birth certificates, everything that you need if you have to run at a moment's notice. So keep something like that. Hide it from your abuser. Make sure that you can, if you need to just slip out the door, you're gone, you can go. But more importantly, know that there are people out there that can and will help you. And like I said, the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, locally in any city, more than likely, they have 211 or 311, which is the non-emergency number that you can call and get information. Every website that you visit, so if you visit something on your phone, for example, a local YWCA that may have a domestic violence program, has an escape button on it. So that if you're looking at it and someone comes up, there's a button you can hit right on that website that will instantly take you out. It won't track if they look up something, it won't show on your phone. If they say, why were you looking for this, for help? But it'll take you right out. So there's, if nowadays, it used to be a computer, but nowadays it's the computer in your hand and you can look it up on there, Google it, find out, what's a local agency, and definitely reach out for help. But the first step is to know that you are worthy. This is not your fault, what is happening to you.
And we talked about a website that we should remind people of. Was it NCADV?
Yes, ncadv.org. And that is a national domestic violence organization that it lists local organizations. If you reach out to them and tell them where you are, they can put you in touch with someone locally and do that. But I think I said at one point, my faith was paramount to everything else, because there are those nights when you're sitting alone and you don't know what's going on and you think you're alone, but you are never alone, because God is always with us. And know that. And one of the more harrowing situations that I was in, he kicked in my front door and came in and held a gun to my head. And he told me that I should call 911 because after he shoots me, he was going to kill himself and somebody needed to come for our 18-month-old baby. And he said, so what do you want to do? What are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to pray. And he laughed at me kind of. He was like, pray, right? Okay. And literally I sat there and I prayed for me and I prayed for our son and I prayed for him. That God would just kind of somehow come in, see us, take care of us, take care of me, provide for my child. And it was a long prayer that I prayed it out loud. But when I finished praying, he was gone.
Yeah.
He had slid out the front door.
Which shows the value of prayer and also the value of that sort of action, doesn't it? It's both, isn't it? I mean, because that's, wow. Well, you're bringing tears to my eyes, Rhonda, but I think I've always been very proud of you for how you got out of that, and then just so excited for you when you found this wonderful man and restarted your life in a new place and all that. You're way up there in my mind of a survivor who's triumphed and whose life speaks to both her faith and her love, and also that there is life after abuse. So
there is, and that is the message. There is life after abuse. I am not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. And if at any point I can reach out and help and pull somebody along with me. I don't know if you saw the article that I wrote for Lutheran Women Today, back when it was Lutheran Women Today.
yes.
And I recently wrote another one for a local magazine here. So I keep telling my story. And I keep hoping that someone somewhere will hear the message of hope, the message that there is life. There is life and life abundantly.
Well, I think you've addressed our theme, very well in telling your story and about hope in your life. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk? I mean, I often ask the people that I talk to, what gets you up in the morning? But how, these are very, what would you call these times? These are terrible times. Let's be honest. We have pandemics of disease and racism and environmental degradation, and you and I could put 10 more things to that list. And so today, what gives you hope today?
If you ask me what gets me out of the bed in the morning, it's always that 21-year-old. He's now 21, Eric.
Wow. I remember all about that. But
yeah. You remember when I sat in your office and said, "How are we going to tell John I'm not coming to church-wide assembly?" But watching him as he grows into adulthood and how he tackles the issues of the day, the conversations that we have around racism, and when I'm going, I'm afraid for you, and he goes, "Mom, you can't be afraid. We can't live afraid. We just have to live and trust that God is going to take care of us." And the eagerness with which he is looking forward to his future. And his friends that I talk to that are saying, we're going to get through this and we are going to be the next ones. And how eagerly they are stepping up to the plate to become, they're not the future, not the distant future anymore,
Sure.
but to become leaders and how they're doing and how they're living and how they embrace things and everyone. So that gives me hope. That gives me hope.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about your story and hope in your story. And, it is a story that it's so wonderful that you're able to share that and willing to share that, because I know it touches people's hearts and encourages those that are in the cycle of abuse to figure out a way to get out of it. And just thank you for it's just so much fun to be in touch with you again, and to have this chance to talk. We don't get the chance too often, and there ought to be more times. But here we are. So our guest today on Hope Matters was Rhonda W, a nonprofit executive from Knoxville, Tennessee, and a member of St. John's Lutheran Church there, and a longtime friend of mine for more than 30 years, and her life speaks of hope. And Rhonda, thank you so much for sharing your life with us today.
Thank you for allowing me to do so.
This is Hope Matters, production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica. We're so pleased that you've joined us today. Each week we talk to people, interesting people, who talk about the theme of hope, because we believe in a God of hope, and hope matters. Thank you for joining us.